Imagine that you could predict if an ad is going to work before you even launch it. You would save a tremendous amount of money. Now, I'm doing exactly that, and in this presentation, I'm going to share with you how I'm doing it, show you behind the scenes, and also show you how you can do it too. How you can use AI to predict ad results. I'm going to give you like what to avoid, some ways to shortcut this, and then how to understand essentially the statistical significance of this. Like how deep do you have to get in to make this useful? Because we want this to be very practical for you, regardless of what stage that you're at. So who is this for? So I'm going to talk about my use case first, which is I'm using these AI swarms, and I'm going to go into what those mean, to test ads before spending money on Meta. So I have my own brand, and I am using this to do that. And I'm also building software to do this. But you can use this strategy for any paid platform. Even though I'm going to talk about Meta ads here, you can do it for Google ads, whether it's display ads, you can do it for any kind of advertising. And you can also use it, and I've seen some folks online play with this, doing organic posts to see, hey, can I make an organic post that goes viral? So the same principle applies to all of these, even though I'm going to be using the Meta example because that's what I know, that's what I'm building, and that's what I can give you definitive answers on. But all of this should be able to apply to all of them. And then a disclosure, I am building a product on this. So my goal here today is to show you how you can do as much of this yourself as you can. I can't really share some of the prompts because that's trade secrets, but you're going to understand enough of the structures that you can make something that fits for yourself by the end of this presentation. So what are we going to cover today? Who the heck am I? We're going to go into why a lot of ad testing fails. We're going to use why use an AI swarm. How does it compare to old school avatars and ad testing? If you've been around for any amount of time, you know all about avatars, how important they are. We're going to be able to go deeper. We're also going to look at how to make DIY swarms that'll actually work. That's the kind of practical section of today. And then we're going to go into the little bit of the advanced stuff. If we have some advanced people here, how to use AI with machine learning to make this kind of like even kick it into a higher gear. So we're going to have something for everybody, regardless of your stage and your budget. I have run and sold an agency and my own brands. I've done over 10 million of spend for myself on Meta. I'm the founder of a company that's doing this. So I'm actually testing and doing this every single day with my team. So before we start, I want to make sure that we don't get very excited, because marketers, and I count myself as one, we get very excited by shiny objects. And one of the problems is that then we ignore the fundamentals. So we have to really understand our audience, and we have to really understand our offer and have a good offer. If you haven't done those, then I'm going to tell you right now, don't jump into this thinking that this is some kind of like magic techie thing that solves all your problems, because you're going to run down this path and then you're just going to be optimizing a really shit offer and you are not going to actually make progress. So don't jump ahead and think that this is a magic bullet. This is something that's one more arrow in your quiver, but make sure you've nailed the fundamentals first. So I just want to make sure that you're not going to chase a shiny object on this one. So now let's talk about why most ad testing fails. It fails because you're kind of flying blind. All right. And the typical paradigm is let's test 3 to 5 ads, see if they beat control. And then you've got a certain budget and you peel off 5%, 10%, whatever it is. And you're saying, I'm going to test new things here. But because of your budget constraint, you can only test so much, right? Because if your test budget is too high, of course, it's going to eat into the ROAS of your overall campaign. So you're constrained inherently by the budget in your campaign. It also takes time, right? And you're fighting this clock. So let's say I'm saying I'm willing to peel off 10, maybe 15% of my budget because I'm aggressive for testing new things. It takes a while to test. I can only test so much with that budget before it starts eroding the overall effectiveness of the money I'm spending. And let's say I find something that wins. Well, I might not really be sure why it wins. I mean, I'm sure that you might have experienced this on one of my e-commerce companies. We call it the George Costanza effect. For some reason, every time the ad that we think won't win wins. And I've been at this company, running this company for like 6 years, and it's every time it's like, yeah, that's not going to win. We used to place bets. It's like, that one's definitely going to win. It doesn't win. And we just don't know why. And you might have experienced that sometimes. So if you're not sure why winners win, how do you replicate it? Right? You can tweak it a little bit, but that might work, that might not work. So these are all things that all of us are up against whenever we're running paid media. So what do? We create avatars, and avatars are fantastic. You should be creating an avatar. You can use psychographics and demographics. And the traditional way is you come up with something like this. And I've got a 27-year-old female, Caucasian, no children, single. She lives in New York City and she likes fashion and romance movies. And then I say, okay, well, if this is my avatar, then I'm going to try to make ads that match this person. But real prospects aren't avatars, right? An avatar is a munched together approximation of an audience, but it's not an audience. An audience is actually a bunch of individuals. And what we're trying to do when we do an avatar is essentially approximate the wisdom of the crowds by calling it one person. And that's a useful mental heuristic, if you will. It's a mental shortcut, but it is kind of low resolution. Imagine if instead you could actually ask a bunch of individual people what their preferences are. And that's what we can do with swarms. All right. So the avatar gets a pretty good ad, right? It's kind of like the blended CTR and CPA of all of those people that saw the ad. And of course you can target more narrowly or more broadly, but then you're playing this game with the budget. And we know that specific ads for specific subgroups will outperform, right? You might have multiple different avatars within your audience, and they're each going to convert differently on different ads. But of course, then we need enough budget to test to statistical significance, which is, of course, a challenge. I like this visual because I'm a very visual person, and I like to think of ads as there's a budget surface area, which is that plate that is there. And there are a few winning ads. There are a few winning ads on that surface area, and your job is to find those ads. All right. Most ads are in that flat area, right? That's the average ad. But there are a few really crappy ads. There's spikes downwards. There are a few really good ads. They spike upwards. And your job is to find those ads. So test 5 ads is like throwing 5 stickers, and they're going to land where they land. Right? And if you've done a good job, they might land on, the edge of one of those upslopes. If you test 100 ads, well, just odds are you're going to find more winners. You got more at-bats. You can test more. You can optimize more. So the predictor of success is, to a large degree, creative volume. If you had an unconstrained budget on testing, you'd probably be able to find a lot better ads because you'd be able to get better at message match. You'd have more at-bats and you'd find more winners. And that was kind of the premise when I started doing this. Can I not be stuck using dollars to test? Can I do something else? So how are most marketers using AI? Well, they're using AI like it's, 2003. Oh, that should say 2023. They're using AI to generate ad copy, and that's fine, but that's like 2023, right? And here's why, right? How are LLMs trained? LLMs are the kinds of AIs, if you're a newer user, they're the kinds of AIs that you're typically using like ChatGPT. And what they do is they go out and they eat the internet. They digest all of that, and it pulls in the good and the bad, and it might correlate some of the good stuff and the bad stuff and say, okay, well, here's an example that someone on the Warrior Forum said was good, but that person has no credibility, but I don't know. So it might be able to guess what an average audience wants, but your audience is very specific. The fundamental to understand is when you're using an LLM to write copy for you, it's trained on good and bad, and it might not be the best judge of it. It can help you, certainly, but it's not necessarily, even if you say, give me the best ad. And you can do those tricks like pretend you're a $1 million copywriter and it's going to pull from its memory, essentially, what a $1 million copywriter might do. It's going to think, oh, well, okay, this is a Gary Halbert. I'm going to pull this. I'm going to pull that. But it's really just pulling in good and bad examples. And most ads are in that range. And most LLMs are trained on that range. But that's not what we want. We want those little spikes. So if you're using AI to draft copy, it can make a bad marketer average, right? It cuts off the lows, but it also can cut off the tops, right? So it rarely finds the winners on its own unless you have a good human copywriter supervising you actually started to master copy yourself. So you have this problem that it makes bad marketers average. So, okay, all those bad marketers are not out there anymore. More are average. And then you still need that good human copywriting to get to that next level using the traditional method. So if you are like, I consider myself an okay copywriter. I don't think I'm the best. I just have to admit that. So I can go and I can hire a really good copywriter. We know that really good copywriters command really high fees. Or you can do something different, which is what I'm going to talk about here, which is testing at mass. All right. So everyone's using AI to draft copy. It's table stakes. It's no longer a differentiator. You should be doing this, but you shouldn't be thinking that this is something magic or special. So here's why AI swarms kind of beat that old school methodology. So the solution is AI proxies. I call them swarms because people tend to resonate more with that phrase. So I'm kind of a dork. So I read a whole bunch of research papers on AI related to marketing. And I found this strain of research papers which talked about researchers finding that they could simulate people taking polls. So if I'm a pollster and I want to go out and I want to figure out people's attitudes towards some legislation, etc., and they found that they could get an 85% accuracy by pretending to be people. I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. I don't care about polls. I care about ads. Can I do the same thing with ads? That would be interesting. And they were doing this with earlier AI models than are available now. So I just went down the rabbit hole on this. And that to me was the unlock on this strategy. All right. We spin up a swarm of lots of AIs to simulate real people, and I call them proxies. So what is an AI really good at? What did the research papers find about this? They found it's really good at pretending to be a person because they've been trained on all of these people's commentary on the internet. So you can tell it, act like this kind of person, and it does a really good job at that. So the natural extension of that, so we should ask the AI to pretend to be our customer avatar and show it our ads and see what it thinks. And actually, that's wrong, right? Because now we're back to, it's an avatar, which is a munged up average of a bunch of people. Average, munged up bunch of people is not the same as the wisdom of the crowds, which is an assembly of a lot of individual people which have clusters of preferences that you cannot see when you have a one munged up person. That's the distinction. And this is the thing that I want you to remember. I'm not dissing avatars. I think avatars are a fantastic way. And if you are not doing that, you must be doing that. But this question is, we all want to be like a top 5%, top 1% marketer. This is how you do that. Right? So if you're not already using avatars, shame on you, go and do that. But this is how you get to that next stage. Okay? So the problem is with the avatar, it's the mediocrity problem, right? We've reduced it to the same problem we had before with avatars, the way we were using it, right? The AI is now pretending to be one average munged up person. That's not how they behave as a group. So the important thing is not to try to shortcut this by doing it in a single AI chat. AI chats have context, which is they're going to look at the entire conversation every time before they generate the next thing. So they're going to pull in all of the old avatar responses, or if you said, now you're this person, what's the answer? You're this person. Now, what's the answer? It's going to remember the first person when you talk about the second person. A chat on an LLM uses the entire history up to its context window to generate the next response. So if I say avatar number 1, you are a 65-year-old woman who is just retired from working at Walmart. What do you think about this ad? And then next in the same chat, I say you're a 45-year-old man who's thinking ahead to retirement and you work in a machine shop. And you show the ad, you will get a bad result. And the reason is you're in one chat and it's looking at the entire history and it might bias the second because of the first. So when you're using LLMs, make sure to start a new chat and clean the slate each time. So that's the difference in this single AI instance versus individual AI instances. So I want everyone to, as a takeaway here, to understand that really, really matters. And because some people have long chats, and I do this, I have my own side thing, which is a mixture of experts where I have individual chats where one's my CFO and one's and then I can have a contextual conversation with that because that AI needs to know all the history. In this case, we need to erase its mind each time. So we're going to spin up many AIs to simulate real people. And each AI is prompted to behave like a specific individual person. All right. And we'll get into what that means and how to do that. But you show your ad to each AI, you see how he or she reacts, and you aggregate the responses. All right. And that's going to give you some voting. And I'm going to show you what my system looks like after this so you can do the same thing. So unlike ad testing, you're getting a lot more information than did they click. I can say other things to them than would you click on this ad? Here's why. These swarms are really, really different. It gives you both quantitative and qualitative information. Okay. When you're ad testing, you're typically saying, did they click? And then you're like, oh, they clicked. Wonder why they clicked. Oh, well, let's try another ad. Can I figure that out? Here you can say, would you click on this ad? And then you say, why did you click on this ad? Why didn't you click on this ad? So now you've got this simulated person, which is simulating to 85% plus accuracy on what a real human would do. And you can not only ask, would you click, or which ad of these is your favorite? You could say why. And that is really important for your learning as a marketer, or as I'm going to show you later, you can actually create an auto feedback loop to self-improve ads using this. But that is the next key here. We're not just testing, does it click or not click? We figure out why. So it's the combination of what Fortune 500s do with their marketing panels, plus what we do as marketers, really doing, click-based testing, and it's both in one. You also could end up, if you just use numbers, finding yourself, remember that spiky graph? If you're a math dork, you'll know about local minima and local maxima. In other words, you could find a spike that is this tall and you think, I nailed it. And there's actually a spike that's this tall sitting right next to it. And you just never find it because you don't know the reason why. So it's a really important concept. Okay, so we get the best of both worlds. Somebody sees this cute kitty ad here and we can ask the AIs, did you click? And then you ask, why did you click? So let's get a little practical here. I want to make sure that you can walk away with something that you can use. So again, I'm going to reiterate because it's super important. This does not replace your media buying plan. You still need to do that. You need to do the basics. Okay, so here's the parts list. I want you to understand all of the components to doing that. Okay, the first is a persona. This is a high level, who is my audience? This is similar but not the same as an avatar. It's a very high level. I am selling to retired women who are on Social Security, whatever it is. I am selling to 27-year-old females who are really into health and fitness. It's a very high level. And then we use that persona with ranges, such as I am aiming for women between the ages of 25 and 35 who are early in their careers, who are thinking about having children, and you put the psychographics and the demographics with ranges. And then the way that I do it is I have the computer roll dice and I say, okay, well, pick some numbers between age 25 and 35, and it's going to pick 27. Okay, great. Married or unmarried? And then I ask, well, what's the average incidence of a married versus unmarried person at age 27? Oh, it's 47%. Okay, roll the dice. Unmarried. Okay, they're unmarried. Do they have children? Unmarried 27-year-olds, do they have children? Roll the dice again. So I'm rolling dice to create an individual proxy. And then I generate a detailed biography. And I'll show you an example of what a biography looks like later. And this is the person. And this is a simulated person. So that's a proxy. And then a panel, so we have our definitions. A panel is a collection of proxies that you can ask a question to. And then a prediction is you show your ad to the panel, and then you get, hey, how would you react? And then you can ask questions like, what do they like? What do they didn't like? And that lets you refine the ads. Okay, so these are the pieces and how they fit together. So it might look something like this. This is Jane. Now, Jane might be in the old days an avatar. But Jane is not an avatar. Jane is a proxy. She is just one. I might have 1,000 Janes. She has a name. She has all the things on that left column that you would normally have as an avatar. But she also has a life story. And guess what? AI is really good at making shit up, right? So it can go and just write a life story of someone. And then you can have something like an interview. Hey, Jane, thanks for sitting down with me. Oh, my pleasure. You can actually just generate an interview. You can have other products she's purchased. Hey, AI, I've got Jane. Here's her life story. What are the last 10 products she's purchased? So you can have all of this really interesting data about one person. And if you're doing an independent one each time, they'll each be different, very different. Because if the next die roll that I'm doing doesn't have Jane, but it's got, Kim, and Kim is 45, and she's Latina, and she is married. The life story will be different. The interview will be different. The products purchased will be different. And now you're going to really have this richness that you have in real demographic surveys. So now you can get ad feedback, all right? So the proxies, it's an ad test plus a panel all in one. So Jane clicked on this ad for the cute kitty thing. When you first saw this post, what did you attract to it? Well, I absolutely adore cats. That caught my eye. The picture was just like something from my kitchen. So you can get that kind of resolution of data. Or Joe, he didn't click on the ad. Joe, when you first saw this post, what did you think? I got a cat, but I was like, why is this post using all these freaking emojis? It looks so dumb. Well, that's kind of the thing that Joe would say because, Joe is 45 and more cut and dry. And that's the kind of thing that you wouldn't get using just a regular avatar. Okay, so how you do it? You create a panel of proxies. Now, and again, let's not worry about what buttons we're pushing and what software we're using. I want everyone to understand the concept because there are a bazillion tools that you can do to do this. All right. And I'll suggest a couple of them to do the DIY version later. Let's just understand the concepts here. All right. Now you're going to show the ad copy and the image to each proxy, fake person independently, and you're going to get feedback, which is kind of like the feedback that we just saw. Why did you click on this? Why didn't you? It's too many emojis, right? You can use a vision model for image creative. So if you're not super into the AIs, there's some of them that can see pictures and some of them that can't. So if you're using GPT-4o, you can ask it to, hey, what's in this picture? Do you like this picture? You can't do that with all of the models. Some of them can't see, but so just make sure. So if you're using, for instance, DeepSeek, it has a really crappy way of looking at pictures and you won't get accurate results. So just make sure you're using a model. If you're using the GPT models, they tend to be pretty good at this stuff. Then the way that I do it, each proxy will vote on its favorites. Here's a bunch of ads. Which one do you like? I have them vote. Give me your top ad. And that way, and I'll show you a screenshot of what mine looks like, but that's how I do it. And then I also aggregate the data from the proxies to see which ad wins and why. This is what my software looks like. Here, we're on the predictions. So you can see this is literally what I'm doing. And I'm saying persona, panel, proxies, promotions, and then predictions. Promotions are where you put your ads. This is literally what I'm doing, what I'm sharing with you here. Okay. Here's the ad on the left. It's one of our test ads. This is actually a prediction that my chief of staff ran, I think Thursday and Friday. And it was for eco-friendly millennials was the segment that we were testing. And here's the ad. And then we ran a very small group here, and that is 25. And we're going to see about statistical significance in a bit. The rating was 3.20. That's useful for comparing different ads. And what did they like and what did they not like? This is the thing that I want you to focus on. Not only did they vote for the ad, and 40% preferred this ad, most users appreciated the inviting real talk tone. Friendly and easygoing tone works well here. So you see this very specific feedback. They disliked. Most users found the call to action vague or weak. The CTA is vague. It's unclear what I'm asking to be invited to do. Now, if you look at this ad, it's really weak. It's true. There is no, like, what am I supposed to do here? So it's given you valuable feedback. This is like, actually a screenshot of what's happening here. Several users expressed skepticism about greenwashing. Oh, that's interesting. I never even would have thought about greenwashing. So like I had to look up what greenwashing was. Apparently it is when you have like a product and it's not actually eco and you're just using marketing to make it look eco and you're just kind of tricking people. So I'm like, oh, I didn't even know this, but like clearly these proxies know about greenwashing and a millennial who's eco-conscious would probably know about that word. So I find this really, really valuable for like insights that I wouldn't have gotten. Y'all can take a screenshot of this if you like. This is the architecture of what I've designed. You are welcome to attempt to rip me off. You can see to the top, these are just databases. They're databases of stuff. And each green box is a piece of code that sends something to an LLM. That's really what it is. Now, why can I, somebody who's generating software to do this, share this with all of you guys? There is some art to this. You're going to see what it is in a minute. You could try to vibe code this, but you'd have to really dig deep into and having enough data for it. So quick answers. What panel size should I use? So the bigger, the better. Smaller panels do give less useful feedback. And that's because you just saw an example that we ran last week. It was a panel size of 25. If you just think about it, like one person can really nudge that, right? Because there's only 25 sample points. So in their voting, et cetera, one person can nudge that. So the academic research, which all of this came from, indicates that 1,000 in the panel is a good number for accuracy. And don't worry if like that sounds like, holy shit, how do I do 1,000? I'll give you some ways of thinking about that in a moment. How detailed should each proxy's bio be? So mine are 12,000 words. So if you want to get an idea, and remember, I'm not writing these things. I'm having the AIs write these things. But just, I want to give you a sense of like how detailed you can be in order to get these kinds of results. So you might get away with smaller ones. We did have some smaller ones that were on the order of hundreds of words, and they kind of sort of work too. And maybe that's where you start. The number one key to accuracy is backtesting. So you want to make sure that whatever you make behaves like actual ad results. So I dial it in because I've been running ads for a really long time. So I can pull my ads and say, this is how it should behave. Now let's show it to these fake people, these proxies, and do they act like the ads actually acted? And if no, then I start tweaking things. So that's one of the very important aspects of this, is to tweak and tweak and tweak. It's not going to work the first time. And then you're like, this shit doesn't work. This guy's full of crap. Okay, yeah. But I also spent months and months dialing this in because the payoff is pretty sweet if I don't have to spend money and I can just hit a button and say, simulate. What niches does this work in? It doesn't matter. It is a process. This is a process. Just like every good thing about your media plan, everything, it is a process. The important thing is that you can accurately describe your customer persona in order to create proxies, right? If you don't know who your customer is, this isn't going to work because you're going to be showing it to randos. Just the same as if you just take an ad and you just send to everybody, and if you didn't have the magic Facebook AI to target it, like running something to a broad, ridiculous audience is not going to have an effect. You're just going to burn money. It's the same thing. You got to know your customer. Does it work for B2B? Yes, your prospects are people. They're the ones seeing the ad. They're the ones clicking on the ads. You might have to have different ads for different stakeholders, different parts of the journey, etc. Same thing. What AI model should I use? Any LLM works for proxy generation. So when you're generating these fake people, it kind of doesn't matter. I tested 5 or 6 of them, and they're largely similar. There's no magic one for proxy generation. For prediction, you need a vision capable model. I use the OpenAI models. Can I vibe code this? I showed you the architecture diagram. You sure can. But I just want to warn you, it's not about the code, right? The make or break elements are the prompts, the data feedback loops, like correlating this to the actual performance, and the audience analysis. All right. And in the advanced section, we'll talk a little bit about machine learning and what that can do to make this better. Not necessary, but makes it better. All right. So I did spend months, not full-time months, but I did spend a long time like dialing in the first prompts. Let's save you some pain. Okay. Number one, there's some nuance to getting it to behave like a person. So play with the prompts. And when I say play with the prompts, really have some success criteria about like when I run this, have a hypothesis and say, I'm going to have this prompt. And when I show it these kinds of ads, I should get these kinds of results. All right. And you might need to experiment with a single shot, which is like, just like, hey, check this out, versus a multi-shot. Like, here's a prompt, give me some initial feedback. And then you go back to it and say, Okay, now refine that. So you have to play with it, all right? Play with different biogeneration techniques. You have to play with this stuff. I expect to use massive prompts. Again, I started out with like a few hundred words. We're now at like 10,000 words in our prompt. And this sounds daunting, but like I didn't generate those 10,000 words. AI generated those 10,000 words. I just experimented iteratively until I found a combination that works. Smaller panel sizes equal less reliable results. We should all know this. If you're running paid media, you know this. Small sample sizes are less accurate. That's just the nature of the game. Use real data to tune the system. I mentioned that. If you have actual ad data, use that. Make sure to test for hallucinations. Okay, if you're not like an AI person now, AIs lie. All right. Sometimes it's like, hey, what do you think of this ad? And then it's like, oh yeah, it's really good. I really kind of love it. And then it's like, okay, what's in this ad? It's like, oh, I can't see that ad. Like it will lie about like what's in the image, whether it can see the image. If it's like, it'll just make shit up. So make sure that you are testing to make sure that your prompts are making so that it will not lie. That's one of those just like things that'll cut out like a month of me tearing my hair out. Like, why is it voting for the dumb ad? Oh, because it's pretending it can see the ad when it can't. So spend time on that. And the last thing is segment based on machine learning data. Next section here. Okay, I'm going to go on Turbo here on this one because this is like some more advanced stuff, but I wanted to share kind of everything that I'm doing here. This is behind the scenes to kind of get even better than the swarm. All right. You can use this with your swarm, or you can actually use this separately. So if you find this stuff interesting, you can use this with your regular ad stuff as well. Okay. So machine learning is a way of looking at massive amounts of data and finding interesting correlations. All right. There is a class of algorithms called clustering algorithms, and it can find hidden patterns in your existing customer base. So one thing that I do is I take a massive customer list. So for my own e-com company, we took something, I don't know, 40,000 people or something that were customers, and we did a data append. And a data append is you go to a data provider, and we used to do this all the time in the direct mail days. You see how much gray hair I have in the direct mail days. And you go and you add on all this data about those people. So it would look them up, and it would say, oh, this person has a porch in their house. They bought a washer dryer in the last 6 months. They are behind on their taxes, all kinds of crazy data. And you can stuff it into a machine learning system, and it will find these groupings of people that are unusually similar. And it's the weirdest thing. Like, you could not possibly do this by hand. But when you do that and you identify these clusters, guess what? Those clusters of people have similarities, which things like the Facebook algorithm will also see. And you can start testing ads against subclusters. I'll be full disclosure, I've only started doing this myself, but it is really interesting and really promising that you can find connections that you never would have seen if you're just doing aggregate testing. So here's our cute kitty ad. Another like little hack. Use this to look at your competitor ads and break them apart. All right. So you can send it and it's like, what's compelling about this ad? Break down the visual elements, and it will say something like plain background, cat pouncing, toy in motion, things like that. And try to find these patterns of what works and what doesn't work in terms of your competitor ads or your own ads, and you'll find new things to test. Next, you can evolve new ads with feedback. Now, remember in the earlier slide, I showed you what people did and did not like about the ad. Now, when I have multiple ads, I can aggregate that information. So I know, did they click? And then I know, why did they click? Guess what? Now I can improve the ad by asking the LLM to rewrite my ad. So there's multiple ways of doing this, but guess what? If you have feedback, then there's no reason why you have to write the ad. You can have the LLM rewrite the ad and rerun the test through the system. Again, a feature that I'm building. I will not say that it is successful. I know how the math works, that we can use. This is called a genetic algorithm. There's a fitness function. I know how it should work in theory, but you can just simulate what a person would do. So one of the next features that I'm working on that you guys could do as well, right? Is why not have an LLM rewrite the ads based on feedback? And so again, here's your recipe for knocking me off and doing what I'm doing and competing against me in the software world. So step one is machine learning. Build proxies and cluster. So I append data attributes to the customer record. I group segments, and that outputs the proxies ready for testing, right? Because remember before I was saying, hey, roll dice. That was the easy way, right? Roll dice and make up these people. Well, if I'm taking actual customer lists and appending data, I don't need to roll dice. I have real people. So I can cluster those people into groups and see what's the best ad for this particular subgroup. Then I can run a lookalike against that subgroup with this ad. Then you decode creative, like look at the vision in LLM, turn ads that have worked in the past into their DNA. So you can come up with a prompt that says, tear apart this ad. Tell me all the elements of this ad. And then you can pair that with the real world ROAS and CTR that you got. I'll tell you that I have suspicions that we can't get to or the full performance of things, because the fact is there's so many steps afterwards in a full conversion funnel that you might not always be able to say, oh, there's a buy, no buy. It's one thing, it's like a Shopify cart. It's another thing if you doing what a lot of us are doing, which is like, these really deep funnels. To be able to simulate that all the way down is probably beyond the capability of this right now, but you can certainly do click testing and find the most viral of the ads, which will get you the lowest CTR, which should drive more sales. Not always, but should, as long as it's getting to the right audience. And then the last is, I use an evolutionary algorithm. You can use multiple different kinds, score new ads, and then essentially your prediction error will shrink because you're getting things better and better. You're optimizing your prompts, you're optimizing your ads, and now the engine can score and auto-generate new ads to beat the old ones. So what do you get from all this? So you get a true understanding of your customer base, the segments of your customer base. You can ads that target more precisely. You can understand what does and doesn't work. You can evolve new ads that work. So at the end, we talked about evolving new ads. Now, whether or not you're doing that manual or you're using technology to do it, that's not the point. The point is, are you getting smarter at doing this, however you are doing it? And then you can validate ads in an AI sandbox before you spend ad dollars. Now, is this free? No. I use a crap ton of API calls, but the crap ton of API calls at 0.00001 cents compared to running an ad, like it's not, I mean, it's a factor of 100 cheaper to test ads, which means I can test 100 times as many ads. So there we have it. Now that you know everything about how to predict ad performance and all of the tuning that has to go into it, you can do it yourself, certainly, but if you want the shortcut, then just use the system that I built. Head on over to atomized.ai.